You grew up in you grew up in Manhattan.
I grew up like 5 blocks from here.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good natural segue. You grew up in Manhattan, and the New York City that you came up in, writing graffiti in and just being out, it is not the same New York City that we're in now. And Manhattan downtown is not really the same Manhattan that we're in now. And it's like the era that you're from, people within graffiti, that's one of the golden eras. That's one of like the golden eras of street graffiti.
Mhm.
Street graffiti is like being revolutionized. More people are doing it. The trains have gone out not that long ago, and people are doing their thing.
Right.
How was it growing up in that time period, starting to write graffiti in that time period, and getting down with the crews you were getting down with in that time period? How was all that?
Well, I mean, it was obviously a great experience. I mean, it was, which was the main part of my childhood. Um, and yeah, I mean, I loved it. Just to answer the first part of the city being different. So, like, you know, when I started writing, it was like 91, I'd say, 92, definitely, every day. Early in, 92, that would probably be like when I started. The city was fucked up. David Dinkins was the mayor. Like, the crack epidemic was still kind of bubbling, so it was dangerous. This neighborhood here has always been pretty nice. 24th Street area. It's one of the last neighborhoods that held out that people could actually live here affordably, as everything else got more expensive. But yeah, I mean, once Giuliani became mayor and did the broken windows theory and started arresting everybody and putting the fear of God in people for like long prison sentences, the city got safer, but not cleaner. So the bombing continued, even though the consequences were were the worst they've ever been. I mean, they're nothing like they are now. Now there's no consequences. So I think of that as, you know, really writing. You know what I mean? Like, because you're like, damn, fuck it all to hell. I mean, I'm gonna get up, and I don't care if I end up, you know, going to jail or whatever. There was the cops were locking you up. There was no like, beep, beep, like get out of here. Like it was, you were getting put in jail. And then Bloomberg came, and made the city like ridiculously expensive. Crime was still low, but then graffiti started to disappear because he started actually erasing it. And I think it was probably the lowest point that I've ever seen to where graffiti was pretty much ending. You go from an era that I started where it was like the streets were virgin, and then guys like, Chino and Astro and Sign and all these like Bester and all these amazing like gate killers, like because that was really the only thing you painted was gates. It was like it never existed. After Bloomberg, and then fast forward to De Blasio and this guy Adams in the pandemic. It's like kind of like how it was. The city is still dangerous, more dangerous than it ever was. You hear all this crazy shit happening. But the graffiti's fucked up because sure I don't follow it, so maybe there's people bombing that. If you're really following it, you're like, oh shit. But it's just like ugly. I mean, and not to say mine was particularly pretty, but if I look at pictures on some of these feeds, and just the graph looked better back then. Like I don't know, like not to say everyone's, but just some of it is just fucking chicken scratch. Like I can't understand anything about it, and it's no good. Like if I see you up and then I see you up again, but I don't know that's the same person. That's not good. A guy like Map, does the M's. You don't have to like his shit, but when you see one of those M's, even in your peripheral, he hit it. That's how you're supposed to do it. But yeah, I mean, so the city's the graffiti. It's crazy. I mean, but I loved it. Growing up at that time, it was just more simple. Uh, Everything was kind of new. So yeah, but then going back to like getting started with basically, you want me to talk about getting started with
Yeah, I mean,
RFC and like how that.
Yeah, we can go from well actually something I want to touch on with what you said was you were saying that like during a time period they made it super illegal. They made it so that graffiti, this the consequences were just way
Right.
more than maybe they should be, but to you that was really writing because you got to be willing to go to prison, you got to be willing to deal with all the bullshit that's going to come with writing.
Yeah.
Whereas today you feel like there's really not that much of a consequence or compared to how it was. And I would agree with you. I would say that the people that I know that who have been bagged, it's like a slap on the wrist and you're chill. And in a weird way, it kind of takes the fun away from graffiti and it kind of takes the purpose away from it because like what is graffiti but illegal? And so if like it's fake illegal and nothing's happening, not that
Right.
people at the same time you don't want to go to fucking jail, but like there's this weird middle ground. And so back in those days, what was the consequence? What are some of the shit that you would hear happening when people got bagged? And
Yeah.
how did that change the way you'd go about bombing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, you know, I somehow, luckily, never got bagged writing graffiti back in the day. Friends of mine who had, I mean, when we were young, I mean, you gotta remember, I started writing when I was like 13, 14. Nowadays, guys start writing when they're in their 20s. Like, that the days of, I mean, you still see young kids walking around, but very rarely. Whereas in my day, a 17-year-old guy had already retired. When I met Wayne and Reese and those guys, they had pretty much, I mean, they were still painting, but they were train bombers. As far as they were concerned, graffiti was dead. I remember them telling me, me and CA, my buddy, who we started RFC, and well, he made it up, and then we met like a week later. And anyway, but we'd go into the Unique Clothing Warehouse where they worked. It was right on Broadway. Sorry if I'm going off a little bit. This
No,
is a
all
good
good,
one.
all good. This is
So,
awesome.
Unique Clothing Warehouse was this like big clothing store. They had like, it was like kind of like a nice thrift store, but they also had new shit. It was like an Urban Outfitters, Times, Buffalo. What's the name of that?
Buffalo Exchange.
Buffalo Exchange,
Yeah.
exactly. Times, like, I don't even know, like a fucking weird stationery store, like with weird, post-its and little erasers, like every tchotchke. In the front, though, when you walked in, they had airbrushing, and Reese and Wayne and this guy Wen were in there, and I'm not quite sure how we found out, but long story short, CA and I started hanging out there, and you know that of course bought all our friends, and all of a sudden, like, it became like a writer's bench, literally. You ask anyone that was down there, like everyone would be there. There was beefs down there. Vandal Squad would come there sometimes on a Friday and like hang out across the street, and it was pretty crazy. And Reese and them would only let Jason and I in to the store, you know, which was why people started saying Reese's fan club, RFC, jealousy, of course. Nowadays, hey, I am part of Reese's fan club. I mean, I'm a fan, but you know what I mean. But he's a good friend of mine. Actually, I was just texting with him before he came up here. Um, but yeah, so Unique was amazing, and it was so cool to be part of that because we saw Star Wars and things about it, the writers bench on 149th, and obviously it didn't exist anymore, so to kind of have one of our own, that was huge. Yeah, so that was dope, but sad when it disappeared, of course. But that's kind of how we started hanging out in the village.
Yeah.
RFC, like, so we started going to West 3rd Street where the McDonald's used to be there. And
I told one of my good friends that you're coming on the show today,
yeah.
and he was like, "Ask him about the fucking McDonald's on West 3rd Street that RFC used to chill in front of. Maybe even started out with that. Just so it's crazy. Tell me about that."
Yeah, so that whole block right there is just full of characters. You got Christopher Street, you got like all kinds of nutters. You got drug addicts, and you got the basketball courts right across the street, the cage, I think they call it. And it's like dudes playing basketball till 3 a.m. So anyway, we started just meeting down there, and we would just walk around the neighborhood during the day and just rack from every store, to the point where like we weren't even allowed to go in this in most of the stores around there. It was pretty crazy, and yeah, like so that just became the hangout, and fucking God bless anyone who walked by there. Now I wasn't. I've been there a million times, obviously, but like these guys, like the core guys were like not really writers. They were they were more like on the stick up kid vibe. They were just robbing people and doing all kinds of crazy shit.
But they were RFC.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. I mean, most of them had a tag, and then there's dudes that were about that life and also bombed. You got Dolt. He started painting again recently. Ed, TBK is the crew. Mate. They bombed like a motherfucker. And, they were all sort of, even though some of the TBK was older than RFC, but, RFC was like the top. And then we had other crews come, and, they weren't like lower, but they were just like almost became like break-offs, and they would go do crazy shit. And oh my God, I mean, I bought a buddy of mine down there one time. I went to Brooklyn Tech for like a year, and then I went to City As after that. But I knew him from Brooklyn Tech, and he started writing. He wrote Dieter, and he was a real nice kid, but he was like albino. And, he wore like hip hop clothes, So I bring him down there. It was like a Tuesday night. There's maybe 20 people down there still. And I'm talking to somebody, and I turn around, and literally he's almost naked. They like took like all his clothes off of him, almost. And I like Jim ran over there, like, what the fuck you doing? And like the 2 or 3 guys that actually did it like ran away. And like I think it just traumatized him. I never spoke to him again after that. But he knows that I had no idea. Like it was like when you see like on a TV show, like someone leaves their car out in a bad neighborhood. 5 minutes later, it's on squares, like someone stole the wheel. That's pretty much what happened. And why I didn't get picked on, well, for obvious reasons. I mean, the main one being that a lot of these guys are my friends. But yeah, I mean, I think I knew how to handle myself. I don't know. I mean, I'm still friends with some of them to this day, and it was weird navigating that world, because I'm a white Jewish guy. Like I was bar mitzvahed, like at summer camp, like, so to be hanging out 2 years after all that ended, till 3 a.m. with guys that are from group homes. And they're like literally like like cutting people for no reason, like really wild shit.
So was it mainly stick up kids chilling, or was it like stick up kids and then like a little bit of writers, but not really that many writers? What do you think the majority of the people were?
I would say a majority were writers, but like not necessarily big ones. I mean, I think everyone had a tag of some sort as far as like being up. Yeah, I mean. Like again, the people that did the bad shit, like robbing, like boosting from a store is one thing, but going in and like punching the owner and like stealing money out of the register, like that's no one, like no main RFC guys really did that. Those were like offshoots, like really bad kids from Brooklyn that like they would know one guy that hung out. This guy Oak MSD from Brooklyn. He was a really cool dude. He would bring like the worst kids. Like these guys were sociopaths, straight up. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they were all dead. But he would bring like 30 of them at a time. So we would be walking around the village, and all of a sudden you just hear like, "Yo, stop! What are you doing?" And they're just robbing like 2 NYU guys and beating them with hockey sticks. Like really. I mean, talking about it now, it's like holy shit. Like I mean, it's crazy to witness that. I mean, one time this kid came out of the PATH train with two girls. They jumped on this kid for no reason, took his jacket, and someone went up and just sliced his face and a whole $150. I was like, yo, this is crazy. That was actually, one of the nights that I was like, I can't be coming down here anymore like that.
Was it a thing where like the group would be provoked, or it was just like straight like hectic? You walk by with something fresh on, and that's that.
The latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, if you have something nice on, you're with a girl, and it's anything that like tested their alpha, whatever they, mind you that we're young too.
How many people would be chilling, do you think, in numbers?
Oh my God, the most probably 50, maybe more.
It's a lot of fucking people.
Dude, yeah, I mean the whole sort of McDonald's was on the south east side, so basically from like the comedy club where it is now to the corner, and then across the street is the basketball court, and like that block would be filled. That was crazy. I mean, because you don't know what kind of shit was being brewed. And then what ended up happening one night, which resulted in me getting fucking demolished, was.
But just like the general era of RFC and all the like historic stories you hear, and the lore that you hear of these times, and how that crew would run shit and how they would operate. Who was the mayor, and did like the cops ever show up when you guys were 50 deep and try to stop shit? Like,
sure, like, yeah, I mean, so yes, they did, but there's only so much you can do. It's a free country, and it's a free state. You know what I mean? Like, you can't tell people like you can't hang out here. I mean, you can say don't loiter, but you got to remember, like, you're a cop, in your early 20s, and you see a fucking sea of kids with polo on and just looking like people you wouldn't want to walk around, and get in front of if you got off the train in Brooklyn somewhere,
yeah.
I mean, and if I was a cop and no one was doing anything crazy, I would just keep it moving. I think it was just the sheer numbers of it was why it just kept getting, there was no consequences.
That's another thing too, is the gear. Like, you see the photos of that era, and everybody's wearing the craziest gear.
Right.
And super heavily associated is boosting culture, loot racking, and all the stores that people would frequent to loot rack from, and all that shit.
Loot rack.
Yeah.
That was, I'm pretty sure that was Guess RFC's. I think he invented that saying. Pretty sure.
Were you ever a part of that? Were you ever into loot racking, or all the gear, Northface, Polo, that whole thing?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Not as heavy as like Guess or CA. They literally did that shit for a job. I mean, loot racking is, by definition, is going out and stealing stuff to make loot. You know what I mean? Not to use drugs with, though. So there's a big stigma, I think, that people that steal are just getting high. And that might be the case for like a large percentage, but you do have people, there's writers, I'm not going to mention their names, but that's their shit. Like, or at least it was. They'd go across country and fucking just boost in every nice mall from here, from, California to here. And, I mean, shit, like, I wouldn't want to do that for a living just because it's too much pressure, and, God forbid if you get caught and whatever. But yeah, I mean, I didn't rack as much. I mean, I did, but not as much as they did. I mean, geez, Guess and CA would go every day with what a Lizzie bag is. So they had a Lizzie bag like it was a giant. I don't know if they give them out anymore. Dwayne Reed, whatever it's called now. Still Dwayne Reed, right?
Yeah.
Some of them, yeah. But anyway, they used to have these big bags. I don't know what you would put in them. Like, anyway, they would make that into a Lizzie, and they would just you know, on the ledge, like on all the Tylenols and stuff, there's a well, now they're all locked up, but before that, there was like a plastic thing on the ledge that's there because they would go behind the aisle and push all the shit out into the back. I mean, they were killing it. And then I started boosting a little bit later on because that was my hustle for a while. Like I was a little bit older. That's what I did to get paper. And I'll tell you one thing: you learn to boost here, and you can come off in the city. You can boost anywhere. I mean, it's like a training camp. And yeah, they did pretty well. I mean, they supported themselves. You know.
How much easier was it to boost back then?
Oh,
Or was it even easier?
Well, that's a good question. So, so back then, obviously, you had the fear of getting caught, right? Because they were definitely pressing charges. Unless you once in a blue moon, maybe you'd find a place that wasn't. But the places you like to go will press charges. So going back to whole graffiti, you know, what fun is it if you can't, you know, if it's free, you know what I mean? I mean, not there's no risk, but yeah, I mean, and then you have that hanging over you, which was the only thing I've ever been arrested for in the city was shoplifting. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, one's for fraud back in the day, but yeah, it's crazy, but it's lucrative. You know, is it easier now? Yes, because they literally can't stop you. There's like no consequences.
What are the laws now?
So in New York, I believe I think it's still $500. I think it might be 1,000. I don't know if they raised it, but they clusterfucked it so much because even, you know, let's say you did it right now and you would not have to if you rack, you're not gonna get in any trouble. But they're not gonna, if you get arrested, you're not gonna get a bond. You know what I mean?
So you're saying if you rack under 500 or a G or whatever it is, you don't get in trouble?
So 500, yeah. So well, check this out. Most stores, like Marshall, give an example. Marshall, TJ Maxx, Home Goods, they're all owned by the same people. If you go in there, right, and you put this potato chips in your pocket in front of them, if they say something to you like, "Hey, can you give that back?" You know, they get fired on the spot. They get fired. So if you're making $15 an hour at, you know, one of these stores, what's your incentive to fucking say anything? Zero. And it's like robbing a bank. You know, that's been around for years. You give them a note, they have to abide by everything you say in the note. And you know, if they don't, they can get fired, obviously. And also they you know, they would risk everyone in the bank. So they're kind of doing that now, you know, with the clothing stores. It's like, don't even approach them. People are desperate, especially in Cali. I don't think it's as much a problem in New York. I mean, boosting's a problem, but like in Cali, it's crazy. I mean, it's just, I don't get it. I mean, that's lawlessness, especially with the people on the streets, you know, junkies, like people that are hooked on Trank and like all these.
Trank is fucking crazy.
Dude, Trank, it's awful. And it's all because we live in a country that is so fucking far behind other countries. It's disgusting. You know, we allow, what's it called? Purdue Pharma, right? Who made OxyContin, right? We allowed them to fucking run rickshaw over this country, literally get hundreds of thousands of people addicted, and then they just, you know, get caught and they'll say we'll pay a big fine, but we won't touch our money. I mean, that's fucking bullshit. And now you fast forward and you have all these people addicted to drugs. What do they do to get money? They steal. You make a place where someone can go get drugs legal, you knock out 30% of crime overnight, you know. And then like a big part of using drugs, I think, is the ritual. You know, like you said with the graffiti, it's not fun anymore. You know, if I'm painting, I mean, I love painting. Don't get me wrong, but like if you know you're walking down 34th Street and hitting gates, you know if the cops drive by, they're not going to say or do anything. You know, I mean, it might be fun for a little bit, but I think it would just get shitty.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I mean, I'm not saying I want to get arrested or I don't want anyone to get arrested, but I surely think that it's only worth doing if there's some sort of risk. Because without the risk, there's no reward.
What was the worst you saw the drug problem in New York City, Manhattan particularly?
Well, it's a good question. I would say, you know, when you're younger, you know, you're naive. I mean, unless you have someone pointing it out to you. Like, I don't have any brothers or sisters. My mom was single. My father was fucked up on drugs, but she kept him way out of our lives. So I didn't know anything about him. But I would say, I'm trying to think. I don't know. It was so different, you know. Like when I was younger, sure there were junkies everywhere, right? But the heroin was real heroin. So like, sure they were junkies, but at least the drugs they were doing were real. Yeah, I mean fentanyl is the number one killer of adults in America under 40, and I mean if that's not enough for them to, you know, start looking for some type of plan, you know, people go, ooh, legalization, yucky, you know. I mean, but what's the choice? Leaving it the way it is and having people ODing and stealing and robbing out of your cars. That doesn't make any sense, you know. People are so stuck in their own fucking world.
It's a shit show. When you go out west or you go to parts of the country where it's real bad, you're left shocked. You know, if you're not used to seeing that shit, even if you are used to seeing that shit, I'm sure you can get desensitized, but
right.
That's the best way I can describe it. Is like you're shocked. You're like, this is
right.
I guess not just like America, because like fucking whatever, but more so like, damn, this is life. You know, this is like our community. This is what little kids have to grow up seeing.
Right.
And obviously within the graffiti community, like a lot of writers fucking pass away from you know, drug abuse.
Right.
Which is sad because they tend to pass away young and it's typically people who have a lot of like in the world of graffiti, a lot of drive and a lot of talent and a lot of like, you know,
yeah,
all
I mean,
that stuff.
dude, it's, you know, got me thinking like just all the people sad. Yeah, I mean it's crazy, as is life. But like, I don't know. I mean, there's no real easy answer. There is this doctor though, down in the East Village. I remember like in 2014, Guess and I were walking around and it said, Dr. Dave, the weed doctor. This is before legalization. So we went in there. Oh, and then when you walk by his office, there was he had like one picture of some street art, but like framed, you know, and like reprinted. And he had a picture of a bunch of guest tags. Like it was like an installation that he like, I don't know. It was an unsanctioned thing, but it looked like art. You know, it wasn't just a tag. Like it was like colorful tags in a row. You know, it looked like he had broken it off something. So we went in there just to ask him, you know, where he found it, and he said that, you know, he didn't know. Someone gave it to him. We believed him. Whatever. Point is, he was a huge advocate for legalization of drugs. And that was in 2014, and you know, growing up in the city, like going to buy weed at the weed shops, weed stores up in Harlem, that was a ton of fun. And as a little white kid, like it was scary, you know. I mean, you know, I felt safe of it, but you know, I remember like, whoa, this is crazy, like really not fitting in the area, you know, which is weird because you know I was used to fitting in. But it was good, you know, because you see that, you know, everyone is different, you know what I mean? So, but the prohibition, right? That's what I was talking about. Oh yeah, to see the weed become legal is pretty crazy. But
Now you got weed shops on every corner, but a lot of them are selling bullshit.
right, well, they're not sanctioned, so they fucked the law up, and so there's a just not to bore you with too much detail, but basically there's a thing called THCA, and it's like basically I don't know how you do it, but it's something like you basically it's one molecule off of when you fully um what do you call that, yield, is a way to like change the molecule, so it's the same fucking thing. It's like you know ripping off the corner of this bag and saying, hey, it's different chips now. So that's how they were able to start dispensaries. Now, if you notice, all of them sell either New York stuff, mostly Jersey, and that's usually fake. So, my point is the city should have spent time, really getting it off the ground properly. They would be yielding way more money now, um, and put these other people out to business. Because, like you said, it's bullshit. You don't know what you're smoking. Some
Yeah.
fucking guy puts in dust. Next thing
Yeah.
you know, you're freaking out. I don't trust it.
Throughout all those years of the early '90s, chilling with RFC, doing all that, painting graffiti. Did you ever start using anything?
Drugs?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely part of my story. So I didn't use drugs at all in the beginning. You know, I yeah, I didn't use up until I was about 19. So no. So as a young guy, like in RFC, like when we first started, I mean, none of us did really, and a few people smoked weed. That was something, but I didn't. And then I remember one night when we were 15, and now I was with my other friends that I grew up with. They lived like next door to me, and we were scheming on having a beer because his dad had gone away at an apartment on 34th Street, so we were just hanging out there, and we went in the fridge, and he had like 6 types of different beers. This wasn't in days of IPA. It was like we had like one Coors Light and one Bud. Who the fuck knows why? So we started drinking them, and we got. I remember barely, but we got like blackout drunk off of like 4 beers, and we were running around the streets, like bumping into people, like like we were a little kid. We were like, "Hey, excuse me," like just being idiots. So that was the first time I ever drank, and then I didn't like it that much. So it wasn't like the next day I was like, "Give me some more." I just wasn't for me. Um, and then yeah, and then weed I stayed away from until I was like 16 and a half. So Macaulay Culkin's brother, went junior high school. Like we know we were all friends with them, and his brother Shane like smoked mad weed, and we hung out that summer. I think it was summer of '98 or '94, I forget. But he would beg us to smoke with him, Shane Culkin. And finally, we just relented one summer day. We were like, fuck it. And we went to this part of Central Park because that's where they used to live, by Central Park. He bought some weed, and that was it. I mean, after that, we started smoking all the time. But I didn't do anything hard until college. You know, which was, I thought, the natural progression. I mean, I don't know what made me continue to do it. But yeah, I mean, my father was pretty bad. I didn't know him. But what's crazy is like, later in life, as my mom like shared some more stuff, you realize like, he's a big part. I have a lot of traits that he had, and I didn't even know him. Which is crazy, but I can choose to make better decisions, which I do. And thankfully, yeah, I've been, you know, doing really good for the last, what was it, 20, I'm trying to think, once in a while I'll have a little, a little drink, or, just like once in a blue moon, but not all the time. You know, I got bad for like a few years back, like in the late 90s. I gotta say,
Yeah.
yes, I moved to Delaware, and all my friends were in the city, and I would go every weekend. But during the week, it just was tough. But thankfully, I got treatment, and I was able to get out of it. And real quick, what you learn about in recovery is not to like, yeah. I mean, it I live my life by principles, so I don't like feel like you know I have to like be a book Nazi, and be like, you know, just for today. I mean that works for some people, Um,
You've been
but
clean for a while now.
well, yeah, I mean, clean minded.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, not like, and I'm, when I was in my addiction, which again, thankfully wasn't that long, but a couple of years, I just didn't have any concern for consequences, which is crazy because like looking back, it's like, who was that person?
Yeah.